being said, Europe has been a bit of a free rider because successive presidential administrations have tried to get Europe to meet the 5% GDP minimum target for spending on defense. Because the US, or the, yeah. So, and because the US has always had a large military budget and our military industrial complex likes to get paid, we obviously have always had this sort of outsized, military budget because until very recently, we wanted to be able to deploy forces anywhere on the planet at any time within 72 hours. We invaded in Afghanistan in 3 weeks. That was the attitude of the time. In a post Cold War environment, there was not until very recently a huge reason for Europe to rearm. That does not necessarily mean an alliance is weaker. There are other NATO countries with capable militaries. There are other NATO countries that could serve as that stopgap. Um, in the event of some sort of Russian action. I think the implication that an alliance only works when everyone is pulling their fair weight isn't necessarily incorrect, but it's not by accident. Some of the security protocols were quite intentional. And one of the intentions was to prevent another land war in Europe because again, we'd done such a good job with the first two. That was part of the problem. Now, geopolitics have changed a lot. During the globalization era, which I think we can say is over, there was even less incentive because the US was patrolling the oceans. So were the British, so were the French, but the US only was patrolling the oceans. Trade was open, and there was this idea that the world's problems could be solved through trade, through negotiation, through diplomacy. This was an area where Europe, especially via the EU, once the EU became its own organization, excelled at a great deal. And then also denies the fact that we are the one of the we're the only nation who's used the Article 5 defense protocol of NATO to ask all NATO countries to contribute to our war in Afghanistan. Everybody was there. The Germans, the Danes, the French, the British, all this sort of thing. Britain lost tens of thousands of soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan fighting alongside us. Same for Canada, same for a lot of other partners. Just because they're not spending $1 trillion a year on the military doesn't mean they're layabouts and louses. Also, these countries have oftentimes opened their lands to military bases with all the associated problems. Ask Japan about Okinawa, with the associated difficulties with that so that we could project power globally. Our ability to protect countries has been a huge diplomatic chip. It has been the paperweight that has ensured world peace for 80 years.